Hey guys, I'm going to try to close us out on our radical totalitarian dictatorships with talking about fascist Italy. And so this will be a little bit different because our text really talks about the idea that fascism was really not quite completed in Italy. The little video that I put up on Benito Mussolini kind of indicates in one of the first sentences that he turned it into this completely fascist dictatorship. But we're going to say with our last slide that that's not really quite what happened. So let's start with the end of World War I. So this picture you might recognize from a Versailles slide earlier a couple weeks ago, and this is the Big Four. It is David Lloyd George, Victoriano Orlando. It is Clemenceau of France and Woodrow Wilson. And Orlando is right here. And, it's kind of interesting that he's got his finger out and he doesn't look too happy because he would leave Versailles very angry because he did not feel that the Italians were treated as they should have been. And Italy really expected to get some territory from joining the Allies in the war. And they did not get it. And so the Italians were very disappointed. They felt that their sacrifices had been in vain. They were not thrilled with their government for getting what they thought it should have gotten. And we have to remember that Italy's been a little bit at unrest, even from its formation as a nation. That southern part of Italy, that poor socialist-leaning part of Italy, never really had gotten what it wanted. The northern industrial part of Italy does get what it wants, but it's not really taken seriously, clearly at Versailles, like the other great nations. It's called the Big Four, but really it's the three people making the decisions, and Italy just kind of being treated as a junior partner. Remember, Italy didn't really join the Allies until mid-war, but nonetheless, this made the war, the results of it, unpopular in Italy, and it also made the parliamentary government, which was a liberal government, elected government, kind of suspect. And so where are the people going to turn? If not to liberal government, where will they turn for answers to their problems? Well, they're likely going to turn to socialism. And yes, there's a group of Italian socialists. Here we see an Italian banner, socialist banner, and our image of Karl Marx up there. And the Italian socialists, they feel that that is the promise, that it's been denied for too long, that, Garibaldi in 1870 was willing to put aside socialist demands in order for this great Italian unity, but it never really has paid off like maybe it should. And so this Marxist view that Italians can make good on all that's owed to them if they just embrace socialism, communism. They begin to seize land and factories post-World War I in the chaos. Same thing that the Russians are doing when they back out of World War I and the seizing of factories, the seizing of land as soldiers are returning from the war effort. The Italian socialist peasants begin to do the same, and the factory workers begin to do the same. And they feel like, you know what, maybe the time for Italian revolution has finally come. Well, in the midst of this is a young, very, very red socialist himself, Benito Mussolini. Now, Mussolini had grown up the son of a socialist. He loved socialism. I read one account of when he left for Switzerland to go to school. He put a medallion of Karl Marx in his pocket and took it with him. Totally sold out on socialism, in trouble all the time, had a very, very interesting young life, got kicked out of 2 different schools for assaulting students with pocket knives, a little bit of a crazy, but nonetheless very dedicated to socialism. Until that is, World War I drew closer. And when World War I happened, Benito Mussolini fell down on the side of those Italians who believed that the war was a good thing. And it's interesting, he did not forsake socialism here, but he believed that Marx taught that because of the clash of thesis and antithesis, that clashes in general tended to bring about great social change. And so he hoped that by Italy going into World War I and fighting valiantly in World War I, there would be a mass change, and that maybe socialism and that kind of upheaval could follow a success in World War I. And so he had this kind of nationalistic socialist angle. Here he is in World War I. Here's a great quote: "From today onward, we are all Italians and nothing but Italians. Now that steel has met steel, one single cry from our hearts, Viva l'Italia." So he says, let's fight this war. Well, there's a lot of socialists that don't believe in the war at all. The most radical communist socialists, they're internationalists. They think this war is all a waste of time. They just want to have their communist revolutions. And so that brings up, after the war, some fighting between these groups. After the war is over, Benito Mussolini uses the what he can to push down the radical socialists on the left. And he begins to find, he comes home still an avowed socialist and still hoping for, a communist revolution of sorts. But he finds that when he gets home, his words connect much better with veterans who are now out of work and can't find things, with the middle class, with the religious people who are just disappointed in the liberal parliamentary government. They're disappointed in government. They're not necessarily looking for a socialist revolution. And so he does an about face and just kind of changes his mindset from socialism to more what we would call fascism. All right. Fascists, they decide that they're going to strike out against both the radical communist socialists in Italy, but also against the liberal government. And so what really is fascism? Well, it's a socialist type of idea mixed with corporations that are working for the good of the state, very traditional, propaganda-driven family values, but most of all, state control and eugenics. All right, and so Benito Mussolini comes from the army. Here he is, all reformed out of his army look and now looking like Mr. Politician. And he and some veterans and some middle-class business owners, they march on Rome, and the king does not want any more problems. And so King Victor Emmanuel says to Mussolini, why don't you form a government? And that way we will be responding to what the people want. And Mussolini comes into power in Italy post-World War I. So Mussolini, he does a lot of transformation, doesn't he? I mean, we go from kind of this World War I veteran to this suited up prime minister, and then a lot of military-esque looks. Here he's in his military style, and he cast himself as Italy's defender. Gotta love everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. So what does Mussolini really believe in? Raw power. Okay, that's what this means, raw power. And so there can be no freedom of the press. There can be no free elections, only fixed elections that he controls. So when it says abolish fixed elections, it means regular elections that are done by a regular calendar. He is going to rule by decree. Arrest people who are in opposition, so no freedom of speech, crush labor unions if they're against his ideas, and put fascists in charge of education. So remember when we talked about the French, they secularized French education and threw all the Catholics out? Well, the fascists are now going to be in charge of Italian education, because we can't have the church in charge of it, because they are going to be a challenge, and we don't like challenges. So while we're talking about this, I put a video clip up that I really want you to watch. It's just a couple of minutes long. It's from a movie called Life is Beautiful. And if you haven't seen it, it'd be great to watch the whole thing. It's all in subtitles, but Life is Beautiful is about an Italian couple in fascist Italy. The woman is Italian and her husband is an Italian Jew. And they get married, they have a child, and then the crackdown on eugenics and the anti-Semitic laws begin in Italy once Mussolini starts really hanging out with Hitler and decides that this is another new way he should go. And so the story is about one Academy Award. It is about a Italian Jew who is taken with his son to a work camp, and what he does to kind of get the son through the terrors of a work camp. And he kind of playfully pretends in this work camp that if you survive and if you're quiet and if you obey the mean concentration camp workers, then you win a tank. And so he has this little 7 or 8-year-old boy that he's trying to kind of not let him know about the horrors of the Holocaust. And it's a really, really great movie. At the beginning, when he's trying to marry his Italian wife, she's a school teacher, and she's a school teacher in a school that has just been turned over to fascism. That's what we're talking about right now. And so she has been teaching there, and now the fascist leader is coming to do a lecture to the students on eugenics and the pride in the Italian race as opposed to all other races. And so this is fairly new for fascist Italian schools. And the main character, Roberto Benigni's character, he decides to try to get in to see this woman that he wants to ask out on a date, but he does it by sneaking into the school and pretending they mistake him for this fascist, racist speaker. And before you know it, he's in the room and he is delivering this fascist, eugenics-driven, Italian nationalistic and racist lecture to the school children, which is really a send-up, a mockery of racism and anti-Semitism, because, of course, he, as a Jew, is delivering this lecture, and it's very, very good. If you understand that the whole thing is to be a satire on anti-Semitism. Here, this Jewish man sitting in this Italian fascist school and lecturing on the essence of humanity. It's very good. I really want you to watch that clip and understand a little better about the racist nature, the eugenics nature of Italian fascism. Here in the corner, you see this propaganda poster. If you were to see the whole thing, it talks about, right, defend the little ones from outside forces, from communism, from outside aggressors. I'm Italy's defender. So we would say in the end, though, that Benito Mussolini never really becomes a true totalitarian. He tries to introduce fascism, but there's 3 big oppositions that he has that mean that he has to share power, okay? He has to share power with big business. He has to share power with the army. And he does not have his own army that is completely fascist and loyal to him. And he has to share power with the Catholic Church. So here, you see this quote, fascism should be more appropriately called corporatism. It is a merger of state and corporate power. So it is corporations, but corporations that work for the good of the state. They do not benefit from freedom. They work for the state in conjunction with the state. And then down here you have a famous picture of Mussolini signing an agreement with the Roman Catholic Church. This is called the Lateran Agreement. It is the Catholic Church and Mussolini striking a religious and political deal, which is kind of an even-Steven type idea. But the fact that Mussolini has to share power with the church, okay, or share power with corporations, or admit that the army belongs to Italy and not to him personally, means that he does not have total control of Italy. And he never quite gets there. But he does form a friendship with Adolf Hitler and draws the attention of Hitler after he supports a fascist movement in Spain. And Hitler does come down and befriend Mussolini, and they start hanging out a bit. And that's not going to turn out so good for Mussolini, as you'll see in a little biographical video that we show. So that's Mussolini's fascism in a nutshell. I'm glad this has been a little bit more short of a video. It'll be a little bit shorter of a quiz as well, maybe 7 questions. And then you'll be done with learning about radical totalitarian dictatorships. Put all those quizzes in a row, and you're going to move on to learning about World War II. And I'm going to give you a little break from me because I'm tired, and I'm sure you're tired. And we're going to look at some World War II videos from Khan Academy and talk about them more during the week. All right. Thanks, guys.